For more than 60 years, the small box remained undisturbed in Charlie Chaplin's vault. Until his grandson eventually broke the lock in 2022, no one knew what was inside. He was stunned by what he discovered. Proof that Chaplin was more than simply the biggest star in Hollywood. Nod. Everyone, including Jay, was duped by the double life he was leading. Hoover, Edgar. Though for all the wrong reasons, the FBI had good grounds to suspect him. The world is now at last discovering what Chaplin had been concealing for so long. Charlie Chaplin was born in one of South London's worst neighborhoods in 1889. His family didn't have much. Hannah, his mother, attempted to make ends meet by working as a nurse and making garments, but it was never enough. Charles, his father, was a performer in the music hall but left. Charlie's parents had divorced by the time he was a baby, and his father had relocated to New York. Hannah was then left to raise Sidney, his older half-brother, and Charlie alone. They barely made ends meet as they relocated from one dilapidated flat to another. Charlie's father was meant to aid, yet he did nothing. Despite Hannah's best efforts, the family quickly fell into even greater hardship. It's just a lie. Then things became worse. Charlie's mother suffered a breakdown when he was 6 years old. She was no longer able to care for them. Sidney and Charlie were taken to a workhouse, which is a facility for the impoverished, but not a good one. As soon as they got there, the boys were taken from their mother. They had shaved their heads. They were treated more like inmates than kids and had shabby clothing. A few weeks later, the boys were transferred once more, this time to an impoverished children's school outside of the city. Fwag. Charlie had vivid memories of it, particularly the day he learned how to write his last name. It reminded him of himself, he thought. Chaplin recalled, in part, how depressing and isolating those years were. It was a harsh, icy existence that made a lasting impression on him. Lasting impression on him. At home, things didn't improve. Hannah had another collapse in 1898 and was admitted to a mental health facility. Physicians thought that sickness and starvation were to blame. The boys were temporarily placed in the care of their father, whom they hardly knew. However, that also didn't last. Because of their father's heavy drinking and the state of the house, child welfare officials had to intervene. For a while, Hannah returned home, but by 1903, she was losing her wits once more. Charlie, 14, had to accompany her on foot to the hospital. Charlie was left to fend for himself after she was returned to the asylum. He recalled one painful visit years later. He was troubled for a long time by the short, odd remark his mother spoke to him. "If only you had given me a cup of tea that afternoon, I would have been all right." Hannah was in and out of institutions for the majority of the following 10 years, although she remained with Charlie in California in her latter years. Long after he rose to fame, she never entirely healed. Charlie's father, meantime, passed away from an alcohol-related disease at the early age of 38. He was broke and alone in the end, but he had previously been a famous performer. Nevertheless, he had assisted Charlie in landing his first stage gig before everything fell apart. Charlie joined the 8 Lancashire Lads, a dancing group, when he was 10 years old. It was a troupe that performed clog dances around the United Kingdom. Weeks before his first performance, he practiced, and he was frightened before taking the stage, but he was hooked once he performed. Charlie Chaplin started his journey to fame out of despair. By the age of 14, he was trying to subsist alone after his mother was sent to a mental institution. He joined a London-based theatrical agency, wishing he could find any kind of work. Instead, he discovered a pivotal moment. He was offered the part of Billy the page boy in Sherlock Holmes because a theater manager named Harry Arthur Saintsbury saw something in him. Even if it was a tiny portion, Chaplin made it stand out. People started to notice his talent when he toured around Britain between 1903 and 1905. By the age of 16, he was sharing the stage with William Gillette, the most well-known Sherlock Holmes of his time, on a renowned West End stage. Audiences adored him, and critics lauded him. More significantly, Saintsbury taught him self-control, discipline, and how to use his innate talent in a professional manner. Stable labor, however, was short-lived. Chaplin became a member of Casey's Circus, a tiny comedic troupe that specialized in burlesque routines, in 1906. Even though he was only 17, he immediately made an impression. His impersonations were charming and nuanced. and he had a talent for physical comedy that was witty rather than crass. Throughout England, the troupe performed in filthy little music rooms, and each performance served as a teaching moment for timing, movement, and audience interaction. Chaplin was a burgeoning star by 1907. When the tour came to an end, he nevertheless reached yet another low point. He was left at square one after months of unemployment and a failing solo act. In 1908, his fortunes turned once more. He got an audition with the help of his older brother, Sidney, who was already employed with Fred Carnot's comedy group. Carnot initially believed Charlie was too timid and weak to be humorous. However, Chaplin disproved everyone's assumptions as he took the stage. He was immediately hired. By 1910, Chaplin was appearing in vaudeville performances across America with Carnot's best team. And one of his most well-liked personas was the inebriate swell, a drunken gentleman. People adored it. He was regarded by critics as one of the greatest pantomime actors they had ever seen. At the moment, Chaplin was unaware that influential individuals were observing. One of them was Max Sennett, the founder of comic films and the head of Keystone Studios. While performing in Philadelphia in May 1913, Chaplin got an odd telegraph inquiring about a man named Chaplin or something similar. It proved to be the start of everything. Chaplin brought a new contract from Keystone to Los Angeles that December. At the age of 24, his earnings more than doubled his stage earnings. After checking into a hotel in the heart of the city, he attempted to orient himself in the unfamiliar world of silent film. There were a lot of slapstick jokes and crazy chases in the Sennett studio. There was only a camera and a vague idea, no script. Chaplin was overburdened. In a subsequent letter, he begged Sidney to visit California. He talked about the large money, the sunshine, and the attractive women. However, Sidney did not immediately take over as Charlie's manager after his arrival. Rather, he became an actor and signed with Keystone, portraying Reggie Gustel. Charlie was left to fend for himself for a spell. Sidney eventually succeeded Charlie as his business manager, and the two brothers started to create one of the most successful film careers ever. For the first time, a humorous tiny man wearing loose-fitting trousers and a bowler hat appeared on the television at the beginning of 1914. It was filmed at a real children's race in California for the 6-minute movie Kid Auto Races at Venice Falls. The individual was causing annoyance to everyone by obstructing the cameras. The audience was unaware that they were featured in the film. Charlie Chaplin was the man, and the little he played had only been created that morning. He assembled the outfit out of whatever was laying around. A tight coat, floppy shoes on the wrong feet, 2 large pants, and a small mustache to allow his face to still display emotion. Something clicked, despite the fact that it was only his second film. People were unable to look away from him. The role was more than just a clown, according to Chaplin. Even though he had to steal sweets from a baby to make ends meet, he was a dreamer, poet, and recluse who continued to believe in love and adventure. By the next year, Chaplinitis had spread around the world. Shops used his picture to sell clothing and toys. Comic strips imitated his style, and songs were made about him. More than 140,000 people chose Chaplin as their favorite actor in a survey conducted by a British magazine. At 26, he became the first worldwide cinema star. He gained power from his achievement. He joined SNE with a huge pay increase after leaving Keystone Studios, where he had produced scores of fast-paced comedic films. He began to alter there. His films were no longer merely ridiculous. They felt chiseled. He touched people's hearts while making them laugh. It was an indication of what was to come and the first instance in which the character shown his profound concern for other people. Oh, the world was stunned when Chaplin signed a contract in 1916. He was promised $670,000 a year by Mutual Film Company, which was more than any entertainer had ever earned. In other words, he made more than $1,800 a day and more than $12,000 a week. Chaplin earned enough in 2 seconds, according to one reporter, to cover the cost of a streetcar journey. He gained something from the trade that was even more valuable than cash. Time to work how he wanted, complete control, and his own studio. Chaplin produced 12 short videos over the course of the following 2 years, demonstrating his progress. He began with quick-witted, silly comedies such as The Floorwalker. However, he was producing poignant, deep stories by the end, such as The Immigrant, which ended up being one of his favorites. Cephalates. In The Vagabond, he skillfully blended humor and melancholy, making it seem more like real life than a sketch. These movies evoke deeper emotions in viewers in addition to laughter. Charlie Chaplin was already among the most well-known people in the world in 1917. He wasn't content, though. He was being held back by Mutual, the film studio he worked for. Thus, he took a risk. He agreed to a new contract with First National, which paid him $1 million for just 8 films and granted him complete control over his output. At the time, Hollywood had never seen such a large sum of money. More significantly, the agreement allowed him to retain half of the income and the copyright to his films. Chaplin used a portion of that sum to purchase a 5-acre orchard in Los Angeles, which is located at the intersection of Sunset Boulevard and La Brea. He converted the site into his own personal film studio after spending $35,000 on it. In a 10-room home encircled by fruit trees, he also resided on the land. The studio was operational by early 1918, furnished with offices, a film lab, editing rooms, and anything else he need. In front of what is now known as Sound Stage No. 3, his footprints may still be seen today. This was the setting for Chaplin's most well-known films over the following 35 years. He wasn't done upending Hollywood, though. Together with Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith, Chaplin founded a brand new film studio in 1919 that was operated by the artists themselves. It was dubbed United Artists. Each of the 4 founders had a significant stake in the business, and they added a 5th partner to assist with day-to-day operations. Upon learning about it, the head of Metro Pictures reportedly remarked, "The inmates are taking over the asylum." He was not mistaken. Hollywood's biggest stars were making the decisions for the first time. Chaplin was excited to begin working with United Artists on motion pictures. However, there was an issue. He refused to be released from his contract with First National. He had 6 more films to pay them. He was therefore forced to continue working under the previous contract while his new business was starting up. One of his favorite movies, The Kid, was released in 1921. His first full-length film, it revolutionized the genre of comedy. Jackie Coogan, who is 6 years old, played an abandoned child who is taken up by a destitute man. It was heartfelt as well as humorous. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Despite having a $250,000 production cost, the movie brought in over $5 million at the box office. It had been written, produced, edited, directed, and starring Chaplin himself. It was brilliantly captured in the poster, an image of someone smiling and maybe crying. Chaplin was prepared to take another chance by 1923. A Woman of Paris, his subsequent film, was distinct. He wasn't even in it, but it was dramatic and serious, merely a brief 3-second cameo. Audiences arrived expecting the little, despite his best efforts to warn them in advance. Some were disappointed, even indignant. Chaplin's longtime leading lady, Edna Purviance, featured in the movie. Eden Purviance. His goal was for her to become a star in her own right. The movie was praised by critics. The people didn't react, but Mary Pickford claimed it made her cry. At the box office, it was a failure. It was even outlawed in several areas due to its dubious morals. After Edna was unjustly connected to a Hollywood controversy, others withdrew it. When Charlie Chaplin met actress Mildred Harris, then 17 years old, in 1918, he was already a tremendous star. A hurried wedding resulted from her mistaken belief that she was pregnant. Chaplin was 29 years old. Things were rough from the start. He made it plain that he didn't think she was very smart. Her desire to continue acting was a major point of contention between them. They had a boy a year later, but he passed away 3 days after his birth. Chaplin moved away at the end of 1919. Although Harris maintained appearances, the marriage was failing. She said he was psychologically harsh when she sought for divorce in 1920. She cheated on him, according to Chaplin. Rumor even circulated that she was associated with actress Alla Nazimova, who concealed her lesbian orientation by entering into a fictitious marriage. Harris passed away at the age of 43 and never achieved significant renown. Chaplin, however, remained the same, Betsiwe, became involved with Lita Gray, another minor. She was 8 when he first met her. He got her pregnant while she was 16 while the gold rush was being filmed. He might have been jailed under California law. The mother of Gray threatened to call the police. Chaplin thus hastily entered into a second marriage, this one in Mexico. According to reports, Chaplin informed people that marriage was preferable to prison, but he also warned Lita that he would make her miserable and that the marriage wouldn't last. Two sons were born to them. He even appeared on the cover of Time magazine at that time, but he avoided her at work most of the time. The union was poisonous. Things went haywire in 1926. Lita discovered that Chaplin was having an affair with M&A Kennedy, her closest friend. She left with the children. She then submitted a divorce petition. One of the most repulsive scandals in early Hollywood ensued. Her grievance was lengthy, more than 40 pages, and contained many unsettling details. She claimed that Chaplin forced her to do things she felt repulsive and coerced her into engaging in sex practices that were prohibited at the time. He informed her that it was a common practice among married couples and that she had to comply as his wife. He boasted that he had done the same with several well-known actresses before to their marriages. The consequences were severe. Newspapers were captivated by the story. A record-breaking settlement was reached at the end of the divorce. Lita received hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they also set aside money for their children. At the time, it was the largest payout of its kind. Chaplin's handling of it was poor. For 8 months, the circus's filming was halted. To prevent them from being included in the divorce, he concealed film reels. He was under a lot of stress. Some claimed that without his well-known suit, he was unrecognizable and that his hair became white. Nationwide, they wanted his movies to be outlawed. His reputation suffered greatly. Chaplin was direct when questioned about Lita Gray years later. He claimed that, aside from her, he loved every woman he had ever dated. Charlie Chaplin has a talent for transforming difficult or gloomy concepts into memorable on-screen moments. Inspired in part by the real-life Donner Party event, in which stranded pioneers had to endure a harsh winter in the mountains, he created the Gold Rush in 1925. Cannibalism is even being used by some. Although Chaplin didn't explicitly depict that, he did construct a well-known scene in which his character consumes a boiled shoe. He recorded the scene over 3 long days and had 20 licorice shoes created to make it work, and the nails were sweet. Chaplin and his co-star experienced stomach issues as a result of all that licorice, but the outcome was iconic. He then stated that he wanted to be known for the movie The Gold Rush. He even hired 600 actual homeless individuals to portray prospectors in order to create realism. Chaplin took a big chance in 1931, when the motion picture industry was transitioning to sound. He produced the silent picture City Lights. He finished after more than 2 years. It took weeks to perfect a crucial sequence in which the protagonist meets a blind flower girl. Chaplin did not disregard sound entirely. In addition to adding other effects, such as a swallowed whistle, he composed his own music for the movie. However, he stayed true to his specialty, which was visual storytelling. The audiences adored it. Albert Einstein was his guest at the premiere. George Bernard Shaw sat next to him in London. City Lights turned out to be one of Chaplin's biggest achievements in spite of the obstacles. Chaplin was prepared to take on a more ambitious task by 1936. The modern era was a scathing, humorous critique of industrial life. A huge clock that ticks away at the start of the movie represents how factory work dominated people's lives. Despite fighting machines and going crazy on the manufacturing line, Chaplin never fails to make us chuckle. Chaplin's voice was heard by listeners for the first time, albeit only in a dumb song composed entirely of gibberish. Based on a well-known French song, he sung gibberish in various languages. It allowed him to transition to sound movies without sacrificing the physical humor that made him well-known. Then followed Chaplin's boldest picture, The Great Dictator in 1940. Chaplin produced an incisive parody of Adolf Hitler at a time when many nations were still attempting to avert war with Nazi Germany. He portrayed Danoid Henkel, a dictator, as well as a Jewish barber. By converting German into amusing nonsense, he made fun of Hitler's remarks. Despite opposition to the film, President Roosevelt urged Chaplin to proceed. The movie was a great hit. Nevertheless, Chaplin subsequently stated that he would never have survived if he had been fully informed about the concentration camps. It wasn't until 1958 that Germany permitted the picture to be screened. His personal life took a negative turn, but his career took off. The 52-year-old Chaplin began dating the 21-year-old actress Joan Barry in 1941. He said that Barry had a special quality and provided her money for acting classes, dental work, and other things, even though he was still married at the time. Although their romance ended, it left a chaotic legacy. Movies like The Great Dictator and Modern Times were reframed as being in favor of communism. However, the FBI never discovered evidence that Chaplin was a communist or engaged in espionage, despite their best efforts. In fact, they suggested terminating the investigation in 1950, only a few days before Senator McCarthy officially began the Red Scare. Chaplin was unyielding. Despite his steadfast support for free speech, he consistently denied being a communist. People now accuse you of being a communist if you leave the curb with your left foot. He used to joke. Even when friends urged him to keep quiet, he refused. For him, democracy meant having the freedom to express one's opinions. He denounced the House Un-American Activities Committee and demonstrated against the indictments of Communist Party members. Despite being subpoenaed, he was never asked to testify, presumably because authorities were concerned about his potential to influence public opinion. To influence public opinion. He maintained that his beliefs were not about advancing communism, but rather defending civil liberty. However, everything was either black or white during the McCarthy era. Either you were American or you weren't. Chaplin was targeted because he didn't cleanly fit into either category. In 1952, things reached a breaking point. Chaplin discovered when traveling to England that he would not be permitted to return to the United States unless he consented to being questioned about his political beliefs. He declined. Rather, he and his spouse, Una O'Neill, made the decision to go to Switzerland. They purchased a house in the sleepy village of Coursier-Servet, close to Lake Geneva. It turned into a tranquil setting for their expanding family. Chaplin insisted that everyone speak English at the table because he couldn't follow French, and dinner was always served at 6:45. When Una married Chaplin, who was 53 at the time, she was only 18. Although many were astonished by the age difference, they developed a strong and enduring friendship. Una supported him during his controversy in exile. Chaplin frequently expressed his love for her. He once wrote that he would get a lump in his throat when he saw her go by ahead of him in the streets of Vet. Even when Chaplin passed away in 1977, their love remained strong. After that, Una lived in isolation until her death in 1991. Chaplin continued to create while in exile. He satirized American consumerism and political witch hunts in 1957 with his play King in New York. Similar to Chaplin's own experience, the protagonist, a prince escaping a revolution, finds himself in a shallow, paranoid version of America. He then directed Countess from Hong Kong, starring Sophia Loren and Marlon Brando, in 1967 when he was 77 years old. It turned his old tale on its head, with rich people losing everything. There were dance sequences in the movie that demonstrated the social hierarchy. Both movies featured topics Chaplin had studied throughout his life, from city dance halls to opulent ballrooms. Survival, estrangement, and class, but now influenced by exile. Chaplin returned to the United States in 1972 after a 20-year absence. At 82, he was uncertain about how he would be viewed. However, the audience roared when he took the stage to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Academy Awards. The longest standing ovation in Oscar history lasted for 12 continuous minutes. It felt like more than just praise at that time. He had previously been turned off by the nation's public apology. The Academy recognized him as a movie giant, and despite his weakness, Chaplin appeared to be touched by the distinction. Years of fighting came to an end as a result, and he returned to Switzerland knowing that his legacy was safe. Queen Elizabeth II needed him in 1975, 3 years later. Due to political concerns and scandals involving his personal life, the British government had postponed the accolade for years. However, his accomplishments were ultimately too significant to overlook. Chaplin had 4 marriages and 11 children by that point. Una had 8 of the kids with her. Many pursued careers in the arts, such as his granddaughter Una, who starred in Game of Thrones, and his daughter Geraldine, who rose to fame as an actress. Charlie Chaplin passed away quietly in his sleep at his Swiss home on Christmas Day, 1977. He was 88. He had been confined to a wheelchair for years due to deteriorating health and multiple strokes. 2 days later, he was buried in a modest private ceremony, marking the calm conclusion of a storied life. One of the most well-known characters in movie history had been Chaplin. His career spanned several decades, from the silent film era to the present day. He left his wife Una and their kids a wealth of more than $100 million when he went away. One filmmaker described him as the most exquisite gift the film industry has ever given us, and tributes began to come in from all around the world. 3 months later, however, a startling event occurred. Villagers in Courcelles-sur-Vive learned that Chaplin's burial had been excavated on March 1, 1978. He had lost his 300-pound oak coffin. It had been stolen by 2 individuals, a Bulgarian immigrant named Gancho Geni and a Polish refugee named Roman Ward. They both wanted to profit from holding the body for ransom because they were having financial difficulties. They took the coffin out of the cemetery and placed it in a shallow grave in a nearby cornfield, after being inspired by a news article. After that, they started phoning Una Chaplin and requesting $600,000 in exchange for her husband's remains being returned. Una, however, was unfazed. She told police that Charlie would have thought the entire situation was absurd and refused to pay. She cooperated with the police and consented to having her phones tapped. One of the largest manhunts in Swiss history immediately followed. Even the 200 public phone booths in the vicinity were under police surveillance. When Wardes was discovered making another call from a phone that had been tapped, their scheme fell apart. Soon after, Gunv was taken into custody. They escorted cops to the secret tomb under duress. Chaplin's remains were discovered and taken home 11 weeks after the theft. 6 feet of concrete was used this time to strengthen the grave and ensure that it would never be disturbed again. The strange crime garnered international attention. Wardes was given a 4.5-year hard labor term in court. Genève was given a sentence that was suspended. Everyone was shocked by what transpired after both men wrote letters of apology to Una. Una pardoned them. "I have nothing special against you, and everything is forgiven," she texted back. Later, according to her son Eugene, Una only responded politely to a note that one of the thieves' wives had sent expressing their regret. Years later, Chaplin's own son and granddaughter even starred in the French movie The Price of Fame, which was inspired by the bizarre tale. The legacy of a guy who had made the world laugh was given a weird and almost unbelievable twist when his final resting place was made the scene of one of the most unusual murders in movie history.